Okay, so the next thing I want to do after I've done that, accomplishments, lessons learned, strengths, weaknesses, what I want to do is, again, reread the next chapter of my life, that outline that I already wrote down, that you should have also already written down. And from there, keeping that in mind, keeping the accomplishments, lessons learned, strengths, weaknesses in mind, keeping in mind the big, like the annual, the bigger goal of where you're trying to go. Now what you want to do is write down in the next chapter, only focusing on the next 12 weeks. So you got to start to compartmentalize the endless infinite future into a concrete 12-week period of time, into a quarter, into a chapter. You want to know what are your strengths to leverage and what are your strengths to develop. So leverage is where you have a rod and you're trying to pry a rock, and you get underneath the rock and you loosen it up, and then you can push a massive rock over, something you could never do without that lever. So when you're looking at strengths to leverage, you're really looking at like, hey, what do we already have going on? What do I already have going on that I should actually just put a little bit more focus, energy, attention behind that will actually help that next chapter write itself. And you'll start to enter much more of a flow state when you identify your strengths to leverage, and then you build a strategic plan around that. So all of this is before you strategically plan, before you granularly plan the next 12 weeks. This is what you want to do before, just to get a full assessment in your mind. Strengths to develop, this is kind of what you suck at, right? Where you're like, I need that to get better. And we've talked already about the skills you may need to meet the challenge. This is usually where those skills start to show up, like, and we hear a lot in this community, like, I need to be better at technology. I need to be better at marketing myself. I need to be better at parenting. I need to figure out my home relationship, family. It's kind of chaotic and we're having too much, lack of communication or efficiency in the household, right? So any of that can be a strength to develop. And then you get granular and you really identify, like, what exactly do you want to develop in the next 12 weeks? It's not in the infinite future. You don't have 2 years to do this. You only have 12 weeks. And it takes about a year, is my experience, to be able to nail it, because otherwise what we tend to do is bite off more than we can chew, and you absolutely don't want to do that, because that'll take you out of flow. And that's the fourth element that we focus on, is this flow, this water. We'll get to that more next month, once you figure out how to break time down. So you want to get really clear, like, if I can only choose a few things to leverage in the next chapter, what exactly are those things? Because that'll take you right out of chaos and overwhelm and too much going on, and you'll actually have time. And we'll go next into strategic issues and then into calendaring, so that you can develop a really good strategic plan based on your strengths to leverage, based on your strengths to develop for where you want to be at the end of the next quarter. Again, if you're doing this in the annual planning, you would do this for the past year. What are your strengths to leverage that you've developed over the past, and that could be a multi-year perspective. And then what are your strengths to develop in the next year? Okay, so to be clear, the exercise here is to presence your next chapter, your goals, your identity evolution. Go back to reread that outline you have for the next chapter, the next 12 weeks of your life, and get really clear of where you're going. And then evaluate your situation according to who you're becoming next, right? And this exercise of evaluation has 2 parts. What are your strengths to leverage? And then what are your strengths to develop? So when you ask yourself, what are your strengths to leverage, you're looking for assets, competencies, resources, advantages that you already have. Sometimes that's also relationships. When you ask yourself your strengths to develop, this is, again, assets, competencies or skills, resources or advantages that you're going to need to be where you want to be in 12 weeks. And don't look for absolute certainty here. You're just guessing. You're just making some really good, educated guess. So again, the guidelines are review the prior year for annual planning, review the past quarter for quarterly planning, use the big sticky notes, brainstorm, write everything down. If you're doing this with other people, if you're doing this with an assistant or a team member, or you're doing this with other family members, remember that as the leader, you're going to listen more than talk, and you're going to get the input and perspectives from your team. All right, that's it. Have at it.